The phone rang at 7 inches the morning, and for half a second I thought it was June. That is the foolish thing grief does to a man even 3 years after the funeral. It lets one wrong sound in the dark put a whole body back in the house. I was already reaching across the mattress before I remembered my wife had been gone since the winter the gutters iced solid and split down the side of the garage. My hand met cold sheet, then my glasses on the nightstand, then the phone still buzzing hard enough to make the wood hum. I cleared my throat and said hello. There was a small hitching breath on the other end, then a whisper. "Grandpa?" The room changed around me. The old floor fan in the corner kept chopping the air. The digital clock kept throwing 7 inches dim blue light across the dresser, but the room changed all the same. "Lila?" I sat up so fast the bed springs complained. "Honey, what's wrong?" She tried to answer and couldn't do it cleanly. I heard her pull in air the way children do when they've been crying long enough to get embarrassed by it. "Why, Grandpa?" I swung my feet to the floor. "Why what?" Another breath. Wet, shaky, trying to be quiet. "Why didn't they take me?" There are questions a man hears with his ears, and questions he feels in his ribs. That one landed in my chest like a dropped tool. I stood up and reached for the lamp, then stopped. Didn't need the lamp, needed my jeans, my keys, and a clear head. "Tell me where your mom and dad are." "They went to Florida." Her voice dipped lower, like she was afraid somebody in the house might hear her and be upset, though the house should have had no one left in it but her. "They took Owen." I pulled my jeans on one-handed. "And you're home alone?" There was a pause too long for any child to have to think about that. Mrs. Kessler said she'd check on me in the morning. That was not an answer a grown man should ever hear from an 8-year-old at 2 in the morning. I was in the hallway by then, passing the framed photo of June in her gardening hat, the one Lila had once said made Grandma look like she was about to negotiate with tomatoes. June had laughed so hard that she had to sit down at the kitchen table. I remembered that in a flash, sharp enough to hurt. "Lila, listen to me," I said, keeping my voice level because children can hear panic inside a whisper. "Go turn on the hall light. I want you where the house doesn't feel too big, all right?" "Okay." I heard small feet, the faint scrape of movement, a click. Then her breathing steadied a little. "Did your mom tell you she was going?" She said maybe. Then she said maybe not. Then they left after dinner. Another pause. Owen got his shark bag. That told me more than she knew. I was in the kitchen now, sliding my wallet into my back pocket, the old one with the crease worn white at the fold. The sink still held the coffee cup I'd rinsed before bed. 2 yellow capsules sat by the toaster, where I took them every morning with weak coffee and toast I burned more often these days. Ordinary things. That is what makes bad news feel mean. It always walks into a room that was just being a room. "Did they say why you stayed?" She said it would be easier. "For who?" I asked before I could stop myself. Lila didn't answer that. Children know when they've wandered close to the truth and can't tell if they're allowed to touch it. I picked up my truck keys. "I'm coming over." "No," she said quickly, and the quickness of it bothered me almost as much as the crying. "Mom said not to make a big thing." There it was. The first little bruise of the night, and it wasn't even mine. "You let me worry about that," I said. I ended the call only after making her promise to stay on the couch with the hallway light on until I got there. Then I put on my work jacket, though it was late April and not cold enough to need one. Habit maybe, or armor. The drive to Daniel's place took 15 minutes if every light behaved. Dayton was all red blinks and empty intersections at that hour, a city between breaths. I passed the 24-hour gas station on Wilmington, the one with the flickering beer sign and the donut shop that still opened before dawn for the factory crowd, though half the factories were gone now. My truck heater clicked and smelled faintly of dust. June had always hated that smell, said it made the whole cab seem older than it was. Daniel and Claire lived in a tidy 2-story, in a development that had gone up where bean fields used to be. Same 3 mailboxes every 30 feet, same porch lights, same little ornamental trees trying to convince people they had roots. I had helped hang the swing on that front porch when they moved in, helped paint the nursery too. Back then, there had only been one nursery to paint, and June had stood in the doorway with color cards in her hand talking about how every child deserved a room made ready before they arrived. When I pulled up, the house was dark except for the downstairs hall. Lila opened the door before I knocked. She had on purple pajamas with the cuffs turned up and one sock half off her heel. Her eyes were swollen, and she tried to smile when she saw me, which nearly undid me more than if she'd burst crying again. I stepped inside and shut the door behind me. "Come here." She came to me hard, not dramatic about it, just all at once, and wrapped both arms around my waist. I held the back of her head and looked past her into the quiet house. No television murmur, no dishwasher, no parent talking low from another room. Just a child awake too late and trying to be brave in a house that had failed her. After a minute, she pulled back and rubbed her face with both hands. "I'm sorry." "You've got nothing to be sorry for. I called you." "Yes, ma'am." And that was exactly right. The living room lamp was on low. Claire's throw pillows were lined up neat on the couch like nobody had actually sat there. An empty cereal bowl rested in the sink. On the chair by the front window sat Owen's blue hoodie, the one with the little surfboard patch on the chest. The whole house had that put-away look people make when they're leaving for someplace better. Then I saw the backpack, small, pink, unicorn zipper pull, sitting by the front closet with a pair of children's sandals tucked neatly beside it. I looked at it, then at Lila. "What's in there?" She glanced over and shrugged one shoulder. "My things." "What things?" She said it like I was slow. "Vacation things." I walked over and crouched, my knees talking back the whole way down. The zipper opened smooth. Inside was a rolled-up swimsuit with yellow pineapples on it, a toothbrush in a sandwich bag, a paperback coloring book, and the little stuffed rabbit June had bought her at Cracker Barrel on the drive back from Cincinnati the year the adoption went through. My hand stayed inside that bag a second too long. Behind me, Lila said very softly, "I packed when Mom said maybe." There are moments when the truth does not arrive like thunder. It arrives like one child's folded swimsuit. I stood up slower than I meant to. "Did your dad see this bag?" She nodded. I took out my phone and called Daniel. He answered on the fourth ring, voice thick with sleep or drink or annoyance. "Dad, where are you?" A rustle. Then, "At the condo." "What's going on?" "You left Lila home." Silence. Not confusion, not alarm. Silence with shape to it. Then Claire's voice entered, not loud, just close enough to his phone to let me know she was there and listening. "Walt," she said in the same tone a nurse uses before telling a patient to stay seated, "we talked this through. Lila didn't want all the stimulation, and Mrs. Kessler was going to look in first thing. She was perfectly safe." I looked at the little pink backpack by my shoes. She packed a bag. "Oh, for heaven's sake," Claire said softly. And that softness did more to lower me than a shout would have, because she gets hopeful and then overwhelmed. We were trying to avoid a meltdown, not cause one. Lila had gone still behind me. Daniel finally spoke. "Dad, we made the call we thought was best." I turned slightly and saw Lila watching my face, not theirs, like she was waiting to find out what kind of world she lived in by the way I answered next. On the phone, Claire said, "Please don't wake her up more than she already is. We really need you not to make this into something bigger just because you're upset." Just because you're upset? Not because an 8-year-old had called from a dark house asking why she hadn't been taken. Not because there was a packed bag by the door. Not because somebody had decided one child fit the picture and the other didn't. Just because I was upset. I said nothing for a moment, and in that silence I could feel exactly what had shifted. Not only Lila's place. Mine, too. I was no longer being spoken to like a father in this family. I was being handled. Then Lila asked, almost under her breath, "Grandpa?" And I looked down at the backpack again, at the pineapple swimsuit June herself had bought last summer, and understood with a cold, clean certainty that this was not the first time my wife had been right about something the rest of us wanted to call impossible. I slipped the phone into my jacket pocket and bent to zip Lila's backpack closed. Claire was still talking in my ear, that same even voice, smooth as a hand pressing down a wrinkled sheet. "Walt." She was tired. She gets herself worked up and then she crashes. We were trying to spare her that. You know how she is. I looked at Lila, at the way she was standing too straight in the middle of the living room, trying not to take up trouble. "No," I thought. "I know how you've decided she is." "Did she cry when you left?" I asked. There was the smallest pause. Not long enough to hear if you didn't know people. Long enough if you did. Daniel jumped in. "Dad, it was late. Nobody handled it perfectly." Nobody handled it perfectly. I stared at the dark television screen over the mantel. where family photos sat in silver frames Claire had arranged by size and season. One was from Christmas. Owen in matching plaid with Daniel, Claire in cream, Lila off to the side, smiling too hard, the way children smile when they are working for it. Lila had gone quiet behind me. "I'm hanging up now," I said. "Walt," Claire answered, firmer now. "Please don't confuse her more than she already is." That landed worse than the rest, because it told me what role I had been given in their house without anybody ever saying it plain. Not grandfather, not father, not even man with a right to question a wrong thing. I was confusion. I was extra weather. I was what got managed after the real decisions had been made. I ended the call. For a second, I just stood there with the phone in my hand, feeling old in the wrong way. Not weak, not tired. Just placed farther from the center than I had been a few years ago, and far enough now that they thought I might not notice. "Can I come with you?" Lila asked. I turned. "With me where?" She looked at the floor. "To Florida." My throat tightened. "Honey, not tonight." She nodded too fast, the way children do when they're trying to help adults feel less ashamed. That made something in me harden. "Did you eat dinner?" She shrugged. "Some mac and cheese. Any before-bed snack." Another shrug. I wasn't hungry. I walked into the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. There were labeled containers, cut strawberries in a glass dish, oat milk, little yogurt tubes, everything in neat rows the way Claire liked it. I found a stick of string cheese and some grapes and put them on a plate. Lila came in and sat at the island, swinging one bare heel against the stool rung while she ate because I told her she had to. Past the kitchen sink, the back porch light was on. Beyond it sat the fenced yard, the little plastic sandbox, the sagging soccer goal Daniel had promised to replace. It was the same yard where June had once knelt beside Lila with a packet of zinnia seeds and told her, "You put something in the ground, you don't get to be surprised when it becomes your responsibility." Claire had laughed when June said that. "Mom, you're talking about flowers." June had answered, "No, sweetheart, I'm not." At the time, it had sounded like one of June's little lessons dropped sideways into a room. She had a gift for that. She could make a sentence sit quietly for months before it told you what it meant. I stood at the sink and looked into that yard until it blurred a little. "You can sleep at my house," I said. Lila looked up so fast I knew she had been waiting to see if she was allowed to need something. "Really?" "Yes, ma'am." I called Marge Kessler before we left. Her porch light clicked on across the yard before she even answered, which meant she had probably been half awake already. Marge had lived next door to Daniel for 6 years and still wore her hair in the same short sprayed shape she'd worn when June was alive. When she came over, she had a cardigan pulled over her nightgown and sneakers on without socks. She stepped inside and took one look at Lila's face, then looked at me. "I was wondering if you were coming." That was enough to turn my stomach over. "What happened?" I asked. Marge kept her voice low, but not low enough to turn this into a secret. "Claire told me yesterday afternoon they were heading out after supper and asked if I'd just keep an ear out tonight and maybe wave if I saw lights on. Said Lila was staying back because she'd had a rough week and needed quiet." Lila was staring at the plate, pinching grapes in half with her thumbnail. "Did she seem happy about that?" I asked. Marge shifted her weight. "No. One word. Flat as a board." "How did she seem?" Marge looked over at Lila, then back at me. Like a child trying not to cry in front of the people leaving her. "There are some things you know already, but still need said by another mouth before they finish becoming real." "Did Daniel see that?" I asked. Marge gave me a look that carried enough answer to make speech unnecessary, but she said it anyway. He was carrying the beach cooler to the car. That hurt more than Claire. Claire I could still place across from me and understand as a person defending her own arrangement of the world. Daniel was different. Daniel had been the boy who once got off the school bus and told his teacher I shouldn't miss career day because my dad explains the Constitution like it was his idea. Daniel had been the teenager who came home, bloody-lipped from a parking lot fight, because somebody shoved a smaller kid, and he stepped in. Daniel had been the man standing in my kitchen 3 years ago, hand on June's shoulder, promising that if they brought Lila into this family, they were bringing her all the way. I remembered the adoption day suddenly so clearly it felt cruel. June in a navy dress she hadn't worn since our niece's wedding. Daniel sweating through his collar because he always sweated when emotions got too close to the skin. Claire holding Lila on one hip outside the county probate office, smiling into cameras and tears alike. June kneeling afterward in the courthouse parking lot to straighten the child's sock and saying, "There, now nobody gets to use the word almost anymore." I had loved her for that sentence, loved her for believing words could build guardrails around people. Now here we were. Marge touched Lila's shoulder. "Honey, your grandpa's taking good care of you." Lila nodded without looking up. I got her overnight things together while Marge stayed in the kitchen talking softly to her about church pancakes and the robin's nest over her porch light. I moved through the house in a way I never had before, not as family, but as someone collecting what the family had left undone. Toothbrush, hairbrush, sweatshirt, her rabbit from the bag. I opened the hall closet for an extra blanket and saw 2 children's sun hats hanging from separate hooks. Owen's blue one was gone. Lila's yellow one was still there, tag from last summer looped through the strap because Claire had never gotten around to cutting it off. I stood there holding that hat and understood something ugly and useful at the same time. This had not been decided in one bad moment after dinner. It had been decided early enough for one child's things to be chosen and the other child's to be left hanging in a dark closet. Back at my house, I made up the couch, though Lila asked if she could sleep in the guest room that used to be June's sewing room. "It still smells like Grandma," she said, almost apologizing for it. "It can," I told her. I tucked her in beneath the old quilt June made from church sale fabric and softball uniforms. Lila held the stuffed rabbit under her chin. "Grandpa?" "Yes." "Did they leave me because Owen is more fun?" I stood there with my hand on the doorframe. "No," I said, and it was the truth in the way that matters most. "They left you because grown people can tell themselves bad things are sensible if they say them calmly enough." She thought about that with the seriousness only children and the elderly have. Then she asked, "Was I bad?" That one went through me slow. "No, baby." She nodded and closed her eyes, but I could tell she was not sleeping yet. Children try to go where you tell them when they love you, even if their minds are still standing somewhere else. I left the hall light on low and went to the kitchen. My house made the usual small sounds around me, the refrigerator settling, baseboard tick, a truck passing on the county road out back. June's recipe tin still sat on the counter where I kept it, because moving it would feel like finishing something I had not agreed to finish. I opened the drawer beside it, looking for my passport wallet. That was where I kept old cards, stamps, the extra church envelopes, things I didn't need until I suddenly did. Under a stack of insurance papers was the adoption scrapbook June had started for Lila. Pale green cover, little silver corners. I had not opened it in over a year. I sat at the kitchen table with it. The overhead light was too bright, making the whole room look municipal. The first pages were courthouse photos, hospital bracelets, a little clipped lock of baby hair in plastic. June's handwriting curved through the margins in blue ink. She labeled dates, moods, meals. First time she called me Nana without prompting. Would only eat peaches if Walt made a big ceremony of it. Slept with one shoe on after zoo trip. The ache in my chest changed shape turning those pages. Less raw, more precise. Near the back was an envelope taped inside the cover with my name on it in June's hand. For Walt, if you ever need reminding. I stared at that a long time before I opened it. Inside was a folded note and one of those little digital voice recorders June used when arthritis made writing slow. I had forgotten she ever owned it. My fingers shook more than I cared for as I slid the switch. Her voice came thin through the tiny speaker, grainy with kitchen noise in the background. I could hear a drawer open, then close. Then June. If you're listening to this, it means I was right to worry that once I'm gone, everybody's going to start calling convenience wisdom. I closed my eyes. Her voice went on, calm as weather, steady as a hand on the small of my back. Claire loves order. Daniel loves peace. Neither of those things is the same as courage, and children can feel the difference long before adults admit it. I gripped the edge of the table. Then came the line that made the whole house seem to stop with me. Promise me. Walt promised me neither child will ever learn which one this family found easier to choose. The room went so still I could hear the clock over the stove tick. Up the hall, in June's old sewing room, my granddaughter slept under one of my wife's quilts because her parents had taken their son to Florida and left her behind. And down in the tiny speaker in my hand, my dead wife had already told me exactly what this was. I did not feel confused anymore. I felt late. By 6:30, I had booked the first ticket out of Dayton I could get, packed a carry-on, and called Daniel once more from the kitchen while the coffee burned on the hot plate. He answered, sounding less sleepy and more irritated, which somehow made things cleaner. "Dad, what now?" "I'm coming down there." A silence. Then Claire in the background asking who it was. Daniel covered the phone badly enough that I heard him anyway. "It's Dad. He's still on this." "Still on this." He came back. "You need to let this settle." "No," I said. "I need you to tell me why there was a packed bag by the front door." That opened a hole just wide enough for the truth to show its outline. Daniel said nothing. Then Claire took the phone. "What exactly are you doing in our house, Walt?" Not how is Lila, not did she sleep. Not I'm sorry she was upset. What exactly are you doing in our house? I looked at June's note on the table in front of me and said, "The work you two left unfinished." Claire let out a breath I could hear but not see. "If you fly down here and turn this into a scene, that is on you." And just like that, before I had even reached Florida, she had done it. She had moved me one step lower still. Not father, not grandfather, not the man holding the child they had hurt. A scene. That was what I was now. A scene. I stood in my kitchen with June's note open beside the coffee maker and let that word settle where it belonged. "Then listen carefully," I said. "Because I'm not bringing one." Claire started to answer, but I was done being answered for. I hung up, finished packing, and left before the coffee had time to go bitter. By noon, I was in Florida with my carry-on in one hand and June's little recorder in my jacket pocket. The air outside the airport hit me warm and wet, smelling like sunscreen and rental cars. Daniel had texted the address of the condo after I told him I was coming, whether he approved of it or not. That, at least, was still something in him. The old instinct to stop making things harder once hard had already arrived. The place was on the Gulf side. 4 stories of pale stucco and white railings. The kind of vacation building meant to look relaxed in a practiced way. Palm trees out front. Sand worked into the elevator tracks. Somebody grilling fish at the pool. I found them at the far end of the courtyard near the water. Daniel was in swim trunks and a faded Reds t-shirt. Owen was bent over a little plastic shovel, digging at the edge of the sand under a striped umbrella. Claire sat in a beach chair with sunglasses on and a paperback open across her knees, one hand resting on the cooler beside her. It was such a clean picture of family that it made the absence inside it louder than any sound on the property. Daniel saw me first. His shoulders dropped not in relief, in resignation. "Dad." Owen looked up, grinned, and waved his shovel. "Grandpa!" That nearly broke my heart in a fresh place. None of this was his fault. He was 6. He was where they had put him, same as all of us. I waved back and kept walking. Claire slid the sunglasses to the top of her head. Her expression didn't change much. She had the look of a woman whose prediction about someone else's behavior had just come true. "So you really did it," she said. There were 2 older women in matching visors at the next umbrella over. They had gone quiet. Daniel stepped toward me, lowering his voice the way people do when they've already decided who the dangerous person is. "Dad, not here." There it was again. Not what happened. Not what Lila needed. Not why the bag had been packed. Not here. That was the moment I knew, all the way through, that Daniel's weakness had become its own kind of choice. I set my carry-on down beside the chair. "Where's your daughter?" Claire answered first. "At your house, I assume, since you removed her in the middle of the night without asking us." I looked at her, really looked. The paperback, the folded towel, the cooler stocked for this day, the child she had brought, the child she had not. "Removed her," I said. "Is that what you call answering the phone when a little girl cries and asks why her family left her behind?" One of the visor women stood up slowly and gathered her tote, not hurrying, just relocating. That was fine. Let somebody hear enough to know what kind of silence had been keeping this tidy. Claire stood now. "Walt, you are upsetting Owen. Then one of his parents can help him understand why his sister is not here." Owen had stopped digging. Daniel turned and told him to go rinse his hands at the outdoor shower. The boy trotted off, looking back once. Daniel waited until he was out of earshot, then looked at me with a face I had once trusted more than my own. "You came down here to make us look like monsters." "No," I said. "You managed that before I booked the ticket." His head jerked a little at that. Small, but I saw it. Claire crossed her arms. "Lila is sensitive. She spirals. We made a practical call for one weekend, and you have turned it into some referendum on our family." I reached into my jacket and took out the little recorder. It already was. Her eyes flicked to it, then back to me. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. "Dad." "No, you don't get to dad me into backing down now." My voice never rose. That was the best part. It made them come toward me, not away. "There was a bag packed by your front door. There was a swimsuit in it. A rabbit June bought that child the year you promised this family was bringing her all the way in. Marge Kessler watched your daughter try not to cry while you carried a beach cooler to the car. And when I called you, Claire told me I was making confusion. This morning she told me I was making a scene. I want to hear one of you say, plainly, how that little girl's call at 2 a.m. was supposed to be the reasonable part." Nobody answered. The wind moved the umbrella once. Somewhere above us a balcony chair scraped. Claire took one careful breath. "You are cherry-picking details that support your emotions. That sentence might have worked on me a year ago. It might even have worked 6 months ago when I was still treating every insult as poor timing instead of truth. But June had burned that weakness out of me at the kitchen table 12 hours earlier." I clicked on the recorder. Her voice came out thin at first under the open air, and then somehow stronger for it. "If you're listening to this, it means I was right to worry that once I'm gone, everybody's going to start calling convenience wisdom. Daniel went still." Claire's face changed by a degree. That was all. But I saw it. June went on. "Claire loves order. Daniel loves peace. Neither of those things is the same as courage, and children can feel the difference long before adults admit it." Daniel whispered, "Jesus." I held his eyes, not hers. He needed to hear his mother with nobody between them. Then the line came, carrying all the force of her absence with it. "Promise me, Walt. Promise me neither child will ever learn which one this family found easier to choose." When the message ended, the courtyard sounded too bright. Pool splash, silverware from somebody's balcony lunch, wind in the fronds overhead. Nobody spoke. For the first time since this started, I could feel the whole arrangement of the moment change. The family gaze shifted. The room, if you can call open air a room, no longer belonged to Claire's tone. No longer to Daniel's wish that things stay smooth. It belonged to the truth, and I was the one holding it. Claire recovered first, but not all the way. That was years ago. Before Owen. Before we understood Lila's needs the way we do now. "Her needs," I said, "or your preferences. That's unfair." "No," I said. "Unfair was a child asking if she got left because she was harder." Daniel flinched. I turned to him fully then. "She asked me if she was bad. That is what your practical decision bought you." His face changed, the way faces do when a man can no longer hide behind abstraction because the wound has finally been named in child-sized words. He sat down in the beach chair hard, elbows on his knees, and put both hands over his mouth. For a second I saw the boy who used to cry only after everybody else left the room. Claire looked at him, and that told me something too. She had expected him to hold longer than this. "Daniel," she said quietly. He dropped his hands. "Did she really ask that?" I did not answer with mercy. You don't get to be surprised by the cost just because you avoided looking at it during the purchase. His eyes lifted to mine then, and there it was at last, the thing I had needed and dreaded in equal measure. Not agreement. Shame. Claire's voice sharpened. "Walt, enough." I stepped closer, not aggressive, just near enough that she had to take me in as a man and not a category. "No. Enough was before your daughter whispered from a dark house because she had already learned she was the child expected to absorb disappointment quietly. The visor women were gone now. A maintenance man pushing towels on a cart slowed, then kept moving. Daniel stared at the sand. "You made me into a problem for noticing," I said. "That's the part you don't get to keep. Not after this." Not after June put words to it before either one of us wanted to admit she saw you clearly. Claire's lips parted, then closed again. For the first time since I had known her, she had no smooth sentence ready. I picked up my bag. "I'm going home tomorrow," I said. "Lila is staying with me until the two of you can explain to her, without euphemism and without hiding inside one another, why she was left behind. Not why it was convenient. Why?" Claire shook her head. "You can't dictate. I already am." It was not a threat. That was what made it land. I was not trying to control their marriage, their house, or their future vacations. I was naming the line they had crossed and the fact that I was done asking permission to protect what mattered. Daniel stood up slowly. His voice, when it came, sounded older than it had that morning. "Dad." I waited. I should have stopped it. That was not enough. But it was true, and truth was finally earning its way into daylight. "Yes," I said. "You should have." He looked at Claire then, and whatever passed across his face did not fix anything. But it broke the easy alliance she had been standing inside. That was cost. That was consequence. That was as much repair as the day had honestly earned. I left them there in the salt air, with June's voice still hanging over the place more strongly than either of theirs. Back in Ohio, Lila met me at the front door before I got my key all the way turned. She had June's old lap blanket around her shoulders, the blue one with the frayed satin edge, and she was holding the rabbit by one ear. "You came back," she said. I set the bag down and bent enough to kiss the top of her head. I said I would. Were they mad? I thought about lying, thought about making it softer than it was. Then I remembered how much damage grown people do when they trade clarity for comfort. "They were made to listen," I said. She considered that and seemed satisfied with it in the way children are when an answer sounds sturdy. That night she fell asleep in June's old recliner while we watched half of a baking show neither of us cared about. Her legs were tucked under the blanket, one hand still curled in the rabbit's fur. The lamp beside her threw a warm circle over the room, catching on June's framed photo atop the bookshelf and the tiny nicks in the coffee table from years of homework, mugs, and ordinary life. I sat beside her with the recorder in my hand until the screen went dark. The house was not healed. Families do not mend in one day just because the right words finally get said aloud. Daniel would carry his part of this for a long time if he was any kind of man at all. Claire might never forgive me for taking the story out of her hands. Some losses had only just begun making themselves known. But the house felt morally true again, and at my age that is no small thing. Near midnight, Lila stirred, opened her eyes a slit, and whispered, "Grandpa?" "Yes, ma'am." She touched the blanket under her chin. Grandma would have been mad. A laugh caught in my throat and came out broken at the edges. "Yes," I said. "She surely would have." Lila nodded, comforted by that, and drifted back under. I sat there a long while after, listening to the old refrigerator hum from the kitchen and the soft tick of the hallway clock, with June's blanket over my granddaughter and June's words still warm in the room, and for the first time since the phone rang at 2:07 the morning, I did not feel late. I felt exactly where I was supposed to be.